through the 50 states, you can expect to see pricing just for the registration, the licensure, just for the licensure and everything that goes into the licensure. 50 states, you can expect to spend something like, $150,000 just in government filing fees. Legal fees, different matter. So you're just...
And the bonds you got to put up.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as we know, some of the states have not dealt with, with the definition of, with changing the definition of money and legal tender in their states under their current money transmitter laws. But, a lot of companies have just gone out and gone, okay, better safe than sorry, Coinbase and BitPay, etc. So it's an extremely expensive thing, and I'm baffled that there isn't sort of like a uniform act just adopted by all of the states. I know there was some talk about doing this several years ago, but evidently somebody's not doing their job because, except Washington.
Yeah, that sounds like good progress. I know. I looked into it in Canada just out of curiosity, and what I found is you can get your license in about 2 weeks. And the banks will work with you with it. Where here, I think once you have that money transmission license, it's still hard to get bank accounts set up to actually move the money that you have the license now to move.
It's impossible. I mean, I have people calling me going like, I will give you $100,000 if you can get me a bank account. I'm not kidding.
I'm charged with opening someone an account this week too, and it's been a nightmare.
Well, reach out, I can help, but it's rough. It's really rough, and interestingly, the banks that are actually granting accounts on a very sort of selective case-by-case basis, they don't even want people to know that they're doing that. Trying to sort of keep out a flood and go sort of, very selective EDD procedure.
All right, guys, I wanna ask something else. So as far as, I know California seems to be a special case for filing for a money transmission license. And if you're a money services business, so if you are, let's say, a popular local Bitcoin dealer, so here's my question. I don't know, hopefully one of you can answer it. Do you have to be like a two-way dealer, like buy Bitcoin and sell Bitcoin to be considered a personal money services business? Or if you only go in one direction, is it still considered a money services business? Or is it simply dependent on, are you taking a cut? Like, for example, if I was to buy Bitcoin and sell Bitcoin, let's say I'm selling Bitcoin, but I'm not charging a percent. Like, I'm not actually profiting. Like, I'm not buying Bitcoin from one person, selling it to another person while taking a cut on the money. Let's say I'm simply selling Bitcoin at market cost, or going out and like buying Bitcoin for myself, even if I'm doing it two ways, but it's not my job. I don't profit from doing that. Could I be a money services business?
Yeah, you still can be. They're so broad on what they define, what FinCEN defines as a money service business. It's, I think you can argue either way under the facts that you just presented, but it certainly, you wouldn't, they have some language in there that says that anything that if you're in the business of, and that's key. You said you're not in the business of it, but so I'm looking at it, if it was primarily your business and you were taking a little bit of a cut on it, then you definitely have to register. But I think it would be safer if you're doing it just to register anyway. But let's see what the other two think.
Yeah, so the way FinCEN defines it is exchanger administrator. That's pretty broad. So this whole discussion sort of, I think, brings up a good topic of what is the role of sort of a lawyer in advising a company that wants to do an act. And I think there's an advocacy side. It may be that Bitcoin Maven is being unjustly prosecuted, and that's something that we should talk about. But I think the real value is we know how the federal government is acting. We saw with the Trump executive order and some of the conversations at the federal level that they're paying more and more attention to, I would say, actions that are conducted with cryptocurrency. So for those watching who want to go on local Bitcoin and want to transact in large amounts over $10,000, I think what this case did was it put everyone on warning that you need to comply with these rules, whether just or unjust.
Hold on, Justin, one second. Now, I thought that for the purposes of FinCEN, the $10,000 round number is totally irrelevant. I don't think from what I understood, that doesn't matter. You can be selling, $300 to $400 every week, and you can still be a money services business. While if you want to sell $100,000 worth of Bitcoin that you mined 4 years ago, that's perfectly fine.
Well, that seems to fall under the definition of user. So if you're a user, right? So remember, FinCEN isn't making any laws, okay? They're simply there to issue like interpretive guidance that clarifies the applicability of the Bank Secrecy Act, right? So their definition of user, because it's really very, very important that we have to remember, the Bank Secrecy Act does not mention convertible virtual currencies. Not in one place, not in one area. It's just not there, okay? So what FinCEN has done is issued guidance on the Bank Secrecy Act and defined user, okay, as a person that obtains virtual currency to purchase goods or services. Now, you could flip that around. So if you're just selling your own stuff, Tone, like you made a lot of Bitcoin in previous years, and you want to offload some of that, and you're selling it. You're just selling your own property, right? You got to reflect that somewhere, though. So it has to be reflected in your tax filings or whatever. But you would squarely probably fall under the definition of user and not transmitter. Transmitter is when you start, that sort of exchange.
But I have that exchanger definition pulled up right here. It's a person engaged as a business in the exchange of virtual currency for real currency funds or other virtual currencies. So yeah, I think Adela, you're right. Like you have to be a business that's purpose is to exchange the money.
But then again, it raises the question as a business, if a court thinks you're as a business, a judge thinks you're as a business, a jury thinks you're as a business, you are as a business. So I guess, we can really just kind of push it and say, I wish FinCEN weren't so broad. They are very, very, very broad in how they define things and how they do not define things. I wish they were more narrow and they would explain more things. But of course, it gives them a lot more power to be this broad because then they can fit a lot more things under their umbrella and their purview.
All right, Justin, you want to jump back in here?
Yeah, well, I would agree that a more narrow definition and maybe more guidance from FinCEN could be helpful. Where I think a lot of the challenge comes for people operating is not complying with FinCEN's requirements, which I think are pretty well known and not so difficult to comply with. I think it's understanding how each of the state's various laws come into play. Quite a lot of my day-to-day is dealing with the different state regulators and assessing how they're interpreting their own legislation and how they're changing the legislation. And it's a cluster, every state treats everything a little differently. Sometimes you have legislation that says one thing, but the attitude of the regulators is another. So it's important for those of us on the crypto bar who's interacting with these regulators to act as educators for them, allowing them to demonstrate that not everything is as scary and sort of nefarious as they may be inclined to think. One resource that may be of some use to your viewers, Tone, is I have a pretty in-depth article about how each state treats cryptocurrency and blockchain, and a list of all the legislation that each state has come up with, as well as some of the software guidance. I can send it to you to link.
Yeah, please. Yeah. I'll put it in the video description, and maybe we can pull up that article when the topic comes up again, because the topic is going to come up again.
Yeah.
All right. So one more thought is like, man, it's gonna be so dangerous for me to do these shows. So one more thought on this. Heard from a friend. So when you have a situation where you have to sell Bitcoin to, let's say, pay bills, and do you really want to tell the IRS that what you're selling is Bitcoin, right? I mean, you don't have to sell them what you've sold to pay your bills. You have, hey, I made X amount of money because I get paid in eggs, I get paid in milk and for my work, and I sell that, and here's my taxes and the money.